Grandma Sandra is mean. She's the meanest grandma in the whole world. That's what my 7-year-old grandson told the judge. My name is Sandra Lawson. And in that courtroom, with my heart breaking and my daughter-in-law smiling, I realized just how far she had gone to turn my grandchildren against me. But what came next? No one saw coming. If you've ever been pushed aside by your own family or fought to protect someone you love, stay with me and tell me. Have you ever had to fight for your place in your family? Share your story below. I'm listening. We all are. The courtroom was too quiet, not the respectful hush I expected from a place of justice, but the kind of silence that presses in on your chest, making it hard to breathe. I heard the soft hum of the fluorescent lights, the distant rustle of a legal pad being flipped, and the slight squeak of Tommy's shoe as he stood, my 6-year-old grandson, my sweet brown-eyed boy who once called me his cookie grandma because of all the Saturday mornings we spent baking together. Now he looked directly at the judge and said, "Grandma Sandra is mean. She's the meanest grandma in the world." Something broke inside me. I didn't cry. Not then. I couldn't. I just sat frozen in my chair, watching the words leave his mouth like arrows flying from a bow I never thought he'd hold. Around me, I could sense the reaction. The way the court reporter blinked more than usual, the bailiff stiffened at the back wall, and even the judge leaned forward ever so slightly, but I couldn't look at them. My eyes were fixed on Tommy. He didn't look scared. Not exactly. He looked trained. Like he had practiced this. Like he'd been told what to say and was now performing it with all the earnestness a child could muster. Behind him, Vanessa sat with her hand on his back. Her face wore that perfected expression of maternal concern, eyebrows knitted, lips pursed just enough, but her eyes told a different story. They glinted with satisfaction. I saw it, that tiny spark, that cruel pleasure in her gaze. She had waited for this moment, crafted it, controlled it. Martha reached over and gently touched my elbow. She sat behind me as she had promised she would ever since I told her about the hearing. "You won't be alone," she said that night over tea, and she wasn't the kind to make empty promises. Her quiet presence now was like an anchor, but even with her there, I felt like I was drifting out to sea. The judge's voice was soft. "Tommy, can you tell me why you think your grandmother is mean?" Tommy glanced at Vanessa, who gave him the slightest nod. He swallowed and said, "She says bad things about Mommy, and she tries to take me and Emma away." I closed my eyes for a moment, not to cry, just to steady myself. I hadn't done any of that. I had never spoken poorly of Vanessa to the children, though Lord knows the temptation had knocked hard on my door, and I had only pursued visitation because Vanessa had cut me off completely after Jason died. Even then, I was careful, respectful, trying to avoid more damage. But now here we were, and my intentions had been twisted into something unrecognizable. I turned my head slowly to find Emma. She sat next to her court-appointed advocate staring at her lap. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. Her hands were folded so tightly her knuckles were white. My sweet Emma. She used to twirl in my kitchen, singing to the radio while I poured pancake batter into heart shapes. Jason's voice echoed in my memory. "Mom, give her time. Vanessa's just adjusting. She wants to feel like she belongs." That was during their first year of marriage, when Vanessa started skipping Sunday dinners, when she began forgetting to answer my calls. I gave her time, years of it, and in return she built walls between me and my grandchildren, brick by brick, excuse by excuse. Tommy's voice broke through again. "She makes Emma cry. Grandma says things that make her sad." I felt like the floor dropped out beneath me. 2 years ago, Emma used to beg to sleep over. She would nestle under my quilt, still warm from the dryer, and whisper stories to me until she fell asleep. If she cried, it was when I had to take her back home. If she looked sad, it was when I waved goodbye from my front porch. Now her sadness had been weaponized against me. Gloria, my lawyer, leaned in. Her voice was low, calm. "Mrs. Lawson, are you all right?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I was. Because what do you do when the child you helped raise looks at you and says you're cruel? What do you say when the boy who once clung to your leg at daycare pickup now clings to a story that paints you as the villain? I sat still, fists clenched beneath the table, and thought of all the times I had let things slide. For Jason's sake, for peace, for the children. I had swallowed so much silence I could barely remember the sound of my own voice. But silence hadn't saved me. It had only fed the lies. The judge thanked Tommy and motioned for the next part of the hearing to proceed. Gloria leaned in again. This time her voice carried quiet force. "It's time." I reached for the folder beside me. My hand trembled slightly, but I gripped the edges until my fingers steadied. Inside were weeks, months of evidence, school reports, photos, testimonies, the truth, page after page, the story I had lived, but no one had believed. As I stood, my knees creaked under the weight of 70 years and the burden of everything unsaid. My heart pounded, not just from fear, but from resolve. Because this wasn't just about defending myself, it was about defending the children Jason had loved with all his heart. It was about showing them that truth doesn't stop being true just because someone says it louder. And maybe, just maybe, it was about finally finding the courage to stop being invisible. They showed up for one of our court-approved visits with their backpacks slipping off thin shoulders and shoes that looked like they'd survived a dozen older cousins before landing on their feet. Emma's shirt was inside out. Tommy's jeans were torn at the knees, not fashionably, but from real wear. They were hungry. Not the kind of hunger that fades after a snack, but a hollow kind that made them quiet. I served grilled cheese sandwiches and sliced apples, their old favorites, and they ate like they hadn't had a full meal in days. Emma glanced around nervously between bites, as if someone might take her plate away. Tommy avoided my eyes. After they were settled in the living room, watching a cartoon that used to make them laugh out loud, I sat at the kitchen table with my tea, fingers tightening around the cup. Something was wrong. More than just distance or grief. This wasn't a phase. This was neglect. But what could I say? Vanessa had made it clear. They're my kids now. The next day, I picked Emma up from school. It was a rare weekday pickup I'd been granted under the court's visitation order. She looked small in the doorway, clutching her backpack straps, her hair falling in uneven strands across her face. As we walked toward the car, I noticed her limping slightly. When we got home, she asked to use the bathroom. 10 minutes later, I found her sitting on the toilet lid, fully clothed, tears streaking her cheeks. "What happened, sweetheart?" I asked gently, kneeling beside her. She hesitated, then slowly lifted the back of her shirt. My breath caught. There, faint but unmistakable, were small purple bruises, the shape of fingers across her ribs. "It was Rick," she whispered, eyes fixed on the tiled floor. "Mommy's friend. He got mad, said I was too loud." I closed my eyes for a moment, gathering every bit of strength I had to keep from trembling. When I opened them again, I simply nodded and helped her fix her shirt. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan, hearing Emma's words echo in my head. I wanted to scream, to drive straight to Vanessa's house and take them both out of there forever. But I knew better. I knew the law didn't work on outrage alone. That's when I started documenting every missed phone call, every late pickup, every time they arrived with clothes too small or no lunch packed or whispered that they hadn't had dinner the night before. I took pictures, not of the children, but of the shoes, the clothes, the half-eaten granola bar Emma once pulled from her pocket like it was gold. I began to keep a notebook. I wrote down everything, dates, times, what was said, how they looked, the tone of their voices, the things that didn't seem like much at the time but painted a clear picture when stacked together. Martha noticed. "You're quieter than usual," she said one afternoon as we stood in my garden. She'd come over with a basket of lemons from her tree. "What's going on?" I hesitated, then told her about the bruises, about the food, about Rick. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You're not imagining this, Sandra. I've seen those kids. They look different. Tired. Pale. You're right to worry." Her validation hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't realized how much I needed someone to say it out loud. A week later, during a routine school pickup, I was asked to step into Emma's classroom. Miss Winters, her teacher, was waiting. A petite woman in her 40s. She looked nervous as she shut the door behind us. "I'm glad you came," she said, voice low. "I've been meaning to talk to you." My stomach twisted. She pulled a manila folder from her desk drawer and handed it to me. "I've been documenting some things. I didn't know who to give this to, but I trust you'll know what to do." Inside were notes, pages of them. Emma wearing the same clothes 3 days in a row, Tommy falling asleep during circle time, both children eating ravenously at lunch and asking for seconds, drawings of dark houses, crying stick figures, adults with red faces and raised arms. "I've raised concerns with the school counselor," Miss Winters said, "but Vanessa always has an explanation. She's persuasive and intimidating." I could hear the fear in her voice. "She's threatened to sue the school before," she added. "Most teachers stay quiet." I didn't blame her. Fear can make good people freeze, but fear can also wake others up. "Thank you," I said, placing a hand over the folder. "You may have just saved them." That night, I sat at my kitchen table again, the folder beside my notebook. My tea had gone cold. The house was still. From the hallway, I could see the faint outlines of the twins' crayon drawings I hadn't taken down. They looked so small, so happy. Before. That's when my phone buzzed. A text. "Unknown number. Check your email. Evidence you need." I froze, then opened my laptop with cautious hands. There it was. An email from Martin, Vanessa's ex-boyfriend, the one she never talked about, the one Jason had met only once and described as shifty. He'd seen my name in the court filings online. He wrote, "I should have warned your son." I didn't have the guts back then, but I'm ready now. Attached were photos, videos, screenshots of texts, Vanessa screaming at him, throwing things, threatening to harm herself if he ever left her. One message read, "If you tell anyone, I swear I'll ruin your life." My hands shook as I scrolled through it all. The Vanessa I knew, the one who smiled sweetly in court and wore beige suits and soft perfume, wasn't new. She was practiced. I printed everything. I added it to the growing folder. Then I sat still, staring at the pile of paper that now represented my quiet rebellion. Because that's what it was. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't accused. I hadn't taken matters into my own hands recklessly. I had watched, listened, written, and now I had proof. When I finally turned out the kitchen light, the house felt different. Not quieter, not safer, but ready. Martin's email wasn't just a window into Vanessa's past. It was a mirror reflecting everything I had feared but never wanted to admit. His words, his screenshots, the shaky videos, each one peeled back the layers of control Vanessa had so carefully constructed. I sat at the kitchen table with the email open on my laptop, the light from the screen casting long shadows across the room. My tea had gone cold again, untouched. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak from the wooden floorboards as they settled with the night. Jason once told me, "She's intense, but she loves hard." He'd smiled when he said it, brushing off the worry in my eyes like it was dust. What no one said was how easily that kind of love could turn into control, how intensity could smother, how silence could turn deadly. Martin had seen it all, and now, so had I. His message was short but clear. I didn't speak up when I should have. I figured I'd dodged a bullet. But those kids, they don't deserve what she's doing. I'll testify if needed. Anything you need." Attached were videos. In one, Vanessa screamed at Martin's young nephew for spilling juice. Her voice was shrill, her movements erratic. Another showed her pacing the kitchen, shouting threats after a minor disagreement. Her face contorted with rage. Not grief, not pain, just fury. The texts were worse. One after another, filled with accusations, threats, manipulations. "If you leave me, I'll make you regret it." "You think anyone will believe you over me? Don't forget, I know how to play nice." I printed everything, every email, every text. I slid them into plastic sleeves and added them to the thickening binder on my table. Each page was a weight, but also a piece of armor. The next morning, I called Gloria. She came over that afternoon crisp and composed in a navy blazer, her expression unreadable until I handed her the binder. She flipped through it in silence, pausing at the transcripts of Martin's messages. When she reached the video clips, I watched her jaw tighten. "This changes everything," she said at last. She pulled a notepad from her bag and began writing in short, sharp strokes. "We'll need to file for emergency custody, and we'll need corroboration." "I already spoke with Martin," I said. "He's willing to testify." She looked up, eyebrows slightly raised. "That's rare. Men like him usually run the other way." "He ran once," I said softly, "but he came back." We spent the next hour preparing the emergency petition. I signed pages with a steady hand, despite the thudding in my chest. Gloria was efficient but kind, explaining each step as she went, making sure I understood what came next. Then she asked, "Have you considered hiring a private investigator?" I hesitated. Would that help? It might give us what we need to shut this down early. Judges don't always move on words alone, but they move on pictures. The thought made my stomach churn. I didn't like the idea of someone trailing Vanessa, photographing her life. But I reminded myself this wasn't about vengeance. It was about the twins. I nodded. Do it. 2 weeks later, the PI delivered a report that made my hands shake. Vanessa was leaving the kids home alone, sometimes for hours, sometimes overnight. He'd captured photos of Emma waiting alone after school. Vanessa parked just a few feet away, asleep in the car. Another showed Tommy knocking on a neighbor's door at dusk, asking for something to eat. But the worst was a recording. Audio only. A moment captured from the bushes near her home. Vanessa's voice, sharp and venomous. "If you tell Grandma anything, they'll take you away and you'll never see me again. Is that what you want? To be all alone?" Then silence. Then 2 small voices, scared, shaky. "No, Mommy, we won't tell." I couldn't breathe. I played that clip 3 times before I could call Gloria. She didn't speak for a long moment after hearing it. "This is it," she said finally. "This is what turns the tide." She came over the next morning. I laid everything out on the kitchen table. The PI's photos, Martin's files, my notes, Miss Winter's folder. Together, we organized it all into a case we could present, not an accusation, a pattern. "Tomorrow," Gloria said as we sealed the final envelope, "we file. This will be hard. Vanessa will come at you with everything she has." I nodded. "I'm ready." But I wasn't sure that was true. I was still grieving Jason, still waking up at night thinking I heard his voice, still checking the mail and hoping for some sign, something that told me I wasn't crazy for believing in my own instincts. But the bruises were real. The hunger was real. The silence from the children was real. And now I had more than my instincts. I had proof. That night, as I turned off the lights and walked down the hallway, I passed the door to the twins' old room. The stuffed triceratops Jason had given Tommy still sat on the bookshelf. Emma's butterfly nightlight still glowed faintly in the corner. I stopped and whispered into the stillness, "I won't fail them again." Will the court believe what the children can't yet say? I didn't know, but I knew I had to try. The courtroom felt like a tomb, still, cold. Every shuffle of paper, every creak of a leather chair seemed louder than necessary. Vanessa sat across from me, her beige suit flawless, her makeup perfect. Her face remained composed, like a sculpture carved for sympathy. Widow, mother, victim. I, on the other hand, was tired. Bone deep, tired. Weeks of collecting evidence, sleepless nights, the heavy ache of knowing my grandchildren were suffering. It had all settled in my joints, but Martha squeezed my hand, grounding me. "You've done all you could," she whispered. Gloria stood and began presenting our case, calm, methodical, unshaken. "Your Honor," she said, voice steady, "we submit the following: school attendance reports indicating neglect, photographic evidence from a licensed investigator, and recorded testimony from Mr. Martin Reynolds, a prior partner of Mrs. Martinez." Vanessa didn't flinch. Her attorney objected here and there, but the judge overruled most of it. Gloria continued. Each new document, a weight dropped gently onto the scale of truth. Miss Winters testified next. Her voice shook at first, but grew firmer as she described Emma arriving in stained clothes, Tommy falling asleep in class, the desperate way they devoured their lunches. "She drew this during free time," Miss Winters said, holding up a child sketch of a stick-figure child standing in front of a locked door. The judge frowned. Then Martin took the stand. "I should have warned someone," he began, "but at the time I was just grateful to be out. Vanessa, she's charming until she isn't. She threatened to hurt herself if I left. She screamed at my nephew for spilling juice, and when I tried to end it, she told me no one would believe me, said she knew how to look innocent." Gloria submitted the screenshots and video files. The room was still except for the soft clicking of the court reporter's keyboard. Finally, she played the audio recording. Vanessa's voice rang out over the speakers. "If you tell Grandma anything, they'll take you away and you'll never see me again. Is that what you want? To be all alone?" The judge's expression darkened. Even Vanessa's attorney looked rattled. Vanessa, however, leaned forward. "That recording was taken out of context," she said smoothly. "I was explaining the legal process to my children. They were confused, frightened by the drama their grandmother stirred up." The judge didn't respond right away. His fingers drummed lightly on the bench. "Your Honor," Vanessa's attorney added, "we ask the court to remember Mrs. Martinez is a single mother who has endured great loss. This is a smear campaign led by a grieving woman who can't accept her son's passing or her changing role in the family." My breath caught, but I didn't speak. I didn't need to, because that's when I heard it. "That's not true." The courtroom turned in unison. Emma had risen from her seat beside the guardian ad litem, her small hands clenched at her sides. Her voice trembled, but her eyes didn't. "Mommy told us to say Grandma was mean. She made us practice." Vanessa froze. A flash of panic crossed her features, quickly masked. "Emma, honey," she said through clenched teeth, "that's enough." The judge raised his hand. "Mrs. Martinez, do not address the child." Emma's voice grew louder. "She said if we didn't do it right, they'd take us away forever, but I don't want to lie anymore." Silence. Tommy began to sob. "I didn't want to say those things, Grandma," he cried, sliding off his chair and wrapping his arms around his own knees. "I'm sorry." It wasn't loud or dramatic, just honest, raw. The kind of sorrow only children can express when they know they've done something wrong and desperately want to make it right. Vanessa stood abruptly. "This is absurd. They're confused. They don't know what they're saying." The judge slammed the gavel once. "Recess," he said sharply. "Guardian, please escort the children out. They are not to be spoken to by either party until further notice." Mrs. Patel gently took Tommy's hand. Emma followed, and as she passed me, she looked back. Her eyes met mine. For the first time in years, there was trust. I nodded, barely breathing. The judge stood and exited the bench. Vanessa slumped back in her chair, her poise beginning to crack at the edges. Her fingers drummed nervously against the table, her mouth pinched tight. Martha reached over again. "They found their voice, Sandra. You gave them that." But I wasn't so sure. They'd found it in themselves. I had simply waited long enough for them to remember who I was. When the court resumed, the judge's tone was measured but decisive. After reviewing the evidence presented and in light of the children's spontaneous testimony, I find there is sufficient concern for their safety in the current living situation. Vanessa's lawyer stood, prepared to object, but the judge continued. Until the full investigation by Child Protective Services concludes, temporary custody of Thomas and Emma Lawson will be granted to their paternal grandmother, Mrs. Sandra Lawson. Vanessa shot to her feet. "You can't do this. They're mine. She's brainwashing them. This is manipulation." Her voice cracked on the last word. The bailiff stepped forward as the judge calmly said, "Mrs. Martinez, your outburst is noted for the record. You will have supervised visitation pending the outcome of the investigation." Vanessa's glare could have burned holes through glass. She turned toward me, eyes blazing. I didn't react. Not because I was gloating, because inside me, there was only one thought. The children would sleep in clean beds tonight. They would eat warm food without fear. They would no longer rehearse lies to protect the person who should have protected them. Gloria leaned over and whispered, "This isn't the end, but it's a turning point. Be ready." I nodded slowly, because truth, once spoken aloud, has a way of echoing far beyond the walls that tried to contain it. Tommy didn't speak. Emma wouldn't let go of my hand. That's how we walked into the house. Silent side by side, their small steps echoing alongside mine down the familiar hardwood hallway. Rain whispered against the windows, steady and unhurried. The house smelled like lemon and something warm from the oven. I had lit the vanilla candle Jason once teased me for using too often. Emma's grip tightened as we passed the coat rack. Her eyes darted from room to room, unsure if this was a visit or something else. I kept my voice soft. "We'll just get settled first, all right?" I said, unlocking the guest room door with the quilts I'd refreshed just the night before. Jason's dinosaur lamp still glowed in the twins' old room, casting its soft blue light on the pale green walls. I had plugged it in that morning. I wasn't sure why. Maybe part of me hoped they'd come home. Maybe part of me had always believed they would. Dinner was simple. Chicken nuggets, mac and cheese, steamed green beans, just enough to look responsible. Emma ate with slow, deliberate bites, as if trying to savor a memory she wasn't sure would last. Tommy, seated across from her, pushed food around on his plate, his fork tracing slow circles through the cheese sauce. I didn't pressure him. Not tonight. Halfway through the meal, Martha rang the doorbell. I opened the door to find her holding a loaf of banana bread wrapped in a kitchen towel. "No child should start over without something sweet," she said. I blinked back tears and hugged her tighter than I meant to. She leaned in and whispered, "You did it." But had I? Because as I watched Emma reach for a second nugget and Tommy stare at the wall above the fireplace where Jason's photo still hung, I wondered what winning really meant. The judge's order was temporary. Vanessa would fight. And these children, these fragile, fractured hearts, would still need more than any courtroom could give. After dinner, I ran a warm bath for Emma and placed a fresh towel on the rack. She didn't speak much, only whispered "thank you" as I brushed the knots gently from her hair. Tommy didn't want a bath. He asked for his pajamas from the bag CPS had handed me earlier that afternoon. 2 mismatched tops, 1 pair of pants with a hole in the knee. I found one of Jason's old t-shirts instead. Soft cotton, slightly too big, with a faded baseball logo on the front. Tommy stared at it for a long moment before quietly putting it on. In their room, Emma climbed into the bed beneath the butterfly quilt I had made for her 4th birthday. It had tiny stitched hearts in the corners, the ones I'd added without telling her. She traced them now with her finger. "Are we staying?" she whispered. For now, I answered, brushing the damp hair from her forehead. Yes. She nodded, eyes wide in the glow of the nightlight. Will it still smell like this tomorrow? I smiled. I hope so. Tommy was sitting on the edge of his bed, feet not quite touching the floor. He clutched the stuffed triceratops Jason had given him for his 4th birthday, green with fraying seams. I said bad things, he said suddenly. His voice was low, uncertain, but you still made room for me. I walked over and knelt beside him, the carpet soft under my knees. There will always be room for you, I told him, no matter what. He didn't say anything after that, just leaned, slowly, against my side. No apology, no explanation, just contact. It was enough. We stayed like that until his breathing deepened, his small body heavy with sleep and the unspoken relief of safety. Back in the hallway, I turned off the lights one by one. The rain continued outside, a quiet companion to the soft sounds of a house not empty anymore. I paused at the kitchen table, where the custody papers still sat beneath a coaster. Gloria had said more hearings would come. Vanessa might file appeals. Nothing was permanent, but tonight my grandchildren were safe. I walked back to the twins' room, checked once more. Emma had kicked off the covers. I tucked them back. Tommy still had the triceratops tucked under his arm. As I turned to leave, Emma stirred. Is Mommy going to take us away again? She asked, barely audible. I sat on the edge of her bed, heart suddenly heavy. I don't know, sweetheart, I said honestly, but right now you're here. You're safe, and I'm right here too. She nodded, eyelids fluttering. I like it when it's quiet. Me too, I whispered. She drifted off, thumb resting gently against her cheek. In the stillness, I thought of Jason, of the nights he used to call me just to say hi, of the way he once asked if it was okay to name his son after my grandfather. I imagined him standing in the doorway, arms folded, smiling the way he did when he was proud and didn't want to admit it. The house was quiet now, but it wasn't empty. Some things had shattered. Others had been stolen. But love had stayed. Quiet. Waiting. Patient as time. Can love rebuild something it didn't break? Maybe it already had. 2 years later, the twins' laughter echoed across Jason's old garden, chasing butterflies between the tomato plants he and I had once tended together. Emma's braid bounced as she darted through the rows, holding a plastic jar half full of dandelion fluff. Tommy followed behind, more careful but still smiling, his sneakers stirring up the warm scent of soil and basil. I sat on the bench Jason had built from reclaimed wood, a pitcher of lemonade at my side, and watched them run. The old Triceratops toy now sat on the porch rail, sun-bleached but still loved. Spring had come, but not just to the yard. Inside our home, something softer had grown, something steady, alive. Not everything lost stays gone. Some things, when given time and care, bloom again. It hadn't been easy. The court's final ruling arrived 6 months after the initial hearing. The CPS report had been thorough, therapy sessions with doctor. Chen had continued. Vanessa, after several missed appointments, completed her required parenting classes. She was granted supervised visits once a month at a neutral facility downtown. The twins no longer dreaded those visits, though they never asked for more. Emma always returned quieter. Tommy took longer to fall asleep those nights. But they no longer feared being taken away. That fear had once lived in their bones. Now, it had thinned to memory. The first few months after the court granted me full custody had been tentative. Emma flinched at loud voices. Tommy hoarded crackers in his backpack. Bedtime came with tears. But gradually, the house had filled with a rhythm again. Morning pancakes, school drop-offs, laughter during spelling practice. One evening, Emma asked if she could call me Grandma Cookie again. I thought I'd lost that name forever, I said. She shook her head. You never lost it. I just forgot for a while. Now, in 2025, the school hosted an open house. The twins were both thriving. Emma had joined the school gardening club. Tommy was reading at a 6th grade level and had taken to journaling, something Dr. Chen said was helping him process emotions. I sat through their classroom tours, met teachers who smiled warmly and spoke about their kindness. No one saw them as that custody case anymore. They were just kids now, bright, healing, whole. Vanessa still came to her visits. She arrived dressed down these days, no polished suits, no rehearsed smiles. She spoke less and listened more. I remained polite but guarded. Trust wasn't something that returned with time alone. It had to be earned. Still, when she knelt once to tie Emma's shoe and whispered, "Thank you for taking care of them," I didn't answer. I simply nodded. That was enough for now. Martha remained a steady presence. Today she joined us in the garden with a basket of tomato sandwiches and potato salad. She laid a gingham cloth over the picnic table and waved at the twins as they ran by. "You've done it," she said, slicing a sandwich in half. "I never doubted, but still, it's something to see." I smiled, my gaze on Tommy as he paused to inspect a ladybug on a tomato vine. "It's not just me," I said. "They did the hard part." Later that afternoon, we drove to the cemetery. It had become a ritual, just the three of us once a season, to visit Jason's grave beneath the magnolia trees. The branches were heavy with pale blooms, their scent delicate in the breeze. The twins knelt beside the stone, placing drawings and a small dinosaur figurine between the flowers. Tommy was quiet for a long time, then leaned forward and whispered, "Dad would be proud." Emma reached for my hand and squeezed. "You're the best grandma ever. Not mean at all." The wind stirred the petals above us, and I felt something shift inside me. Something I hadn't known was still tense, finally loosen. I gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "Then I guess I'll keep making you eat your vegetables." She rolled her eyes and laughed. Tommy grinned. We sat there for a while, not saying much, just watching the branches sway. On the drive home, Emma fell asleep in the back seat, her head resting against Tommy's shoulder. He didn't move, just sat still, thoughtful, watching the road ahead. At home, I tucked them into bed. The dinosaur lamp still glowed, the butterfly quilt still warmed, familiar things, loved things. I stepped outside one last time, letting the door swing gently shut behind me. The stars were faint above the treetops. The garden was quiet. The house behind me, full. I thought again of Jason, of promises made in grief, of all the things I had feared I couldn't do. "I kept them safe," I whispered. No reply came, just the soft rustle of leaves and the hum of a porch light buzzing above. Maybe being a family isn't about blood. Maybe it's about staying when it's hard, about showing up again and again until fear gives way to trust and silence gives way to laughter. Maybe it's about choosing each other every single day. And if that's true, then we weren't just a family because of Jason. We were a family because we chose to be. As the twins laughed over tomato sandwiches in Jason's old garden, I realized something simple, yet profound. I was never invisible. I was just quiet, waiting to be heard. I've learned that no one has the right to make you disappear in your own family. Speaking up, even when your voice trembles, can be the first step to healing. If you've ever felt overlooked or pushed aside by those you love, share your story. Let's remind each other. We matter, we belong, and it's never too late to take our place at the table.